Cooped up in the house in isolation. For some, it's been weeks, for others, days. And with the exception of essential workers, we're aiming to keep contact to a minimum. But how are we doing? Hello and welcome to the Unpublished Cafe. I'm Ed Hand. We're again coming to you from a remote location and practicing physical distancing to enhance safety. Here at the Unpublished Cafe, we're bringing you information and advice from experts, whether it's the need to bring in the Emergencies Act to deal with the pandemic, or look at the safety of the food supply chains in Canada. Key issues when you're dealing with a crisis of this magnitude. Last week, we put out the call to our followers to see who'd like to share their story since COVID-19 turned our world upside down. We're going to chat with a number of people on this edition of the Unpublished Cafe to hear how you're coping, and perhaps we'll learn some new skills to deal with the stress. And our first person joining us is Cindy from Ottawa's East End. And Cindy, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
How have you been dealing with the isolation?
Well, one thing for sure is I've been keeping tabs on the news. Another thing I've been doing is I have been reaching out to a lot of people via Twitter, Facebook, trying to keep people's spirits up. I know, although things are far from funny, I'm trying to keep people's spirits up.
Yeah, a little levity goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and humor is the best medicine.
Tell me something. Have you been going outside much at all?
Well, I only go out for essential things, and every time I go out, I make sure that I help. I say thank you to all the people working.
Do you wear gloves and a mask when you go out?
No, I think the main thing to do when you go out and return home is to wash your hands. If I touch my door handles or any surface, I always make sure that I wipe them down with Clorox wipes that I have.
And, that's another sort of interesting situation we're dealing with today. You mentioned just going to get wipes in general. When you do go out for groceries or essentials and such, are you finding that there's not a lot of stuff left?
You know what? I've never seen anything like it. One of the things that I did buy the second last time that I went out was I got a bottle of Javex. And I haven't had to use it yet, but I had picked up some Clorox wipes, so it's been carrying me through until I still have some left.
Now, do you have any elderly relatives, neighbors that you're helping out, or perhaps people with compromised immune systems that do need to stay in but still need to get material?
Well, I have a neighbor, but she's been out working, and each time that I see her, I didn't find out this until I talked to her a couple of weeks ago. But every time that I see her, the first time I saw her was I asked her if she needed anything, but I'm in a building where I don't really see a lot of people because I'm taking this very seriously.
Do you find your neighbors are taking it seriously?
You know what? It is really, really quiet. I see the odd person going in and out, but for the most part, I'm staying in.
What lesson has this taught you or you've learned about yourself from dealing with this pandemic so far?
Well, you know what? I think being kind to people is the main thing, and understanding, making sure that a person maintains their social distance and keeping other people safe.
Cindy, I want to thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Our next guest is Ghazala, who lives with her husband in Ottawa's South End. And Ghazala, thank you for joining us on the Unpublished Cafe.
Thank you so much.
How long have you been self-isolating?
I self-isolated myself for 14 days, and that is from 17th of March.
And did you find it difficult?
It was actually my own personal choice since I went to the COVID-19 assessment center, and when they spoke to me, they said you don't qualify for the test. but we would strongly suggest that you self-isolate yourself.
And why did you go to the assessment center?
It's because I was feeling cold symptoms, and it was lingering on because I already took 1 week off from my work before that. So just to make sure that I'm not a threat to anybody, and keeping myself safe as well.
Now, from our earlier discussion, you had mentioned to me that you also had to self-isolate with that cold back then because your husband has a compromised immune system.
That's correct. Yeah, he lives with me, and it was very, very important for me to be safe and not go outside. Since I have a cold, my immune system might have gone down. So if I only have a cold, I should not contract this virus, COVID-19.
Now, when you mentioned that you took a week off work because you had that cold and you weren't feeling well, you're working at the airport. You're an essential service, are you not?
That's correct.
And can you tell us about the last day you were at work? Or are you still going to work now?
Yes. So what happened is that since I took the 1 week off as sick from 14th of March, and then after that, continuing, I took my 14-day self-isolation. So it gave me 3 weeks to rest at home. But when I went on Wednesday last week, it's just like there's nothing going on, and it's like a ghost town, literally.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, obviously, you do have to get out and get supplies, groceries, et cetera, like that. When you do go out, do you have the gloves? Do you have a mask?
I do. I have a glove and I have a mask, more so that because I have cold, I don't want to inflict it on anybody else or should not get anything. So I'm just being very careful. I take my gloves and I wear my mask.
You know, when you look outside the window, or perhaps maybe when you're out of the grocery store, or whenever you do go out, are you seeing people following the directives from the government? Physical distancing, social isolation, washing their hands all the time?
They are. Quite a few are practicing, but there are some who are not. Because I live in a house which is back into a park, I still see it is reducing now because the government is really emphasizing, but I still see young children with their families and even elderly following them. So it is my great concern that they should not be out because Government of Canada is emphasizing continuously, like every single day, almost every other hour, to stay safe and stay home.
And do you think these people just think it's inconvenient, or do they not, sense the gravity of what we're dealing with right now?
I am thinking that they don't sense the gravity of this issue. This is a grave issue, and they're out, and they're actually taking their young out and their elderly out. I fail to understand what is the reason why they're not following the like from yesterday we have got to the alerts as well on our cell phones. So people like the Government of Canada has been great. They have been continuously on it and bringing the awareness to the common people to follow it, because this is the only way we can flatten the curve. Otherwise, it's spreading, because I think some people are not listening, and that's the reason why the graph has gone more towards ages from 40 to 50 than to the seniors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But probably they're not listening, and they think probably their immune system is good, or I don't know. I think they are not aware of the seriousness of this treacherous virus. This is really, really dangerous.
Ghazala, I want to thank you for joining us, and you and your husband stay safe, all right?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And our final guest joins us from Morrisburg, Ontario, on the shores of the St. Lawrence River. I'm pleased to be joined by Peter. And Peter, first off, thanks for joining us on the Unpublished Cafe. How are you and your family holding up?
We're doing okay so far. We're holed up seriously. We went out for groceries once in 3 weeks. Other than that, we've been in the whole time.
Now, as I'd mentioned, you're in Morrisburg. That's a bit of a smaller town. Are you able to get enough? Is there enough supply down there for the town of Morrisburg and the surrounding area, or are you having to travel farther?
Yeah. There haven't been many supply chain problems here. We kind of ran out of toilet paper for a couple of weeks, but there's been some in the stores recently. Other than that, everybody's been really good. The stores have been good about opening early for seniors, and there's service clubs here that are delivering groceries for anybody who's under quarantine. So it's all pretty good.
Does it appear the residents of Morrisburg are following directives from the government to self-isolate, physical distance, that kind of thing?
I think that's on a case-by-case basis. It seems like there are some people who just don't get it and are still out walking around, and we know they were just down south and they're out walking their dogs and they're not supposed to be off their property. Now, I guess people got the message when they started having to sign off when they got off the airplane, but people who came back in the week before that, I think a lot of them still don't get it. And
how does that make you feel?
I don't know, horrible, but it's a free country, and unless you're going to, declare martial law and lock people down, some people are going to do what they're going to do,
Yeah, well, I guess possibly the next step's the Emergencies Act if they went that far.
Well, I think it's going to be a bit before we see that. Things seem to be, headed in the right direction. There's still huge problems in Ontario with testing. We don't know how much there is here, how much came back from March break. I mean, Ontario is like 350 per 100,000 on testing. It's the lowest province in Canada. Some of the rest of them are over 2,000. And when you look at places like South Korea that actually did blunt the curve, they're in the like 5,000-6,000 per 100,000.
Now, you had a visit to the hospital in this whole situation, did you not?
Yeah, kind of very early. My wife and I both came down with a really odd flu that presented very much like COVID. We ended up in the emergency ward because she has asthma and was having difficulty breathing. When we got there, we were, at the triage, and we said, "Look, we both got the flu. We think it might be COVID." And at the time, they laughed. It was early in the thing, but none of it was taken seriously. We were given the, have you been to Wuhan? Have you been to Italy? Well, if you haven't been there, you don't have it. It turned out later we were tested by the health unit and we did not have it. But I just found that the whole thing with what was going on in Italy at the time, that healthcare professionals here were just so blasé about it.
Yeah, that'd be a little frightening, especially if you're sick and presenting at the hospital.
Now, when we went back for testing, the protocols were all in place. We were met outside, gowned and gloved, and brought in. Somebody followed us around with a mop and did anything, don't touch anything, come into this one little room. Like they seem to have got it together at that point. But the first experience was just bad.
Now, obviously, you're just across the river from the United States, and they're having a heck of a time dealing with this right now. You don't get a lot of American tourists, do you, before this all came out?
There's a fair bit of cross-border stuff. Morrisburg is Upper Canada Village, so we get a lot of tourists in from Europe every year.
Oh, okay. All right.
So that's going to be like just horrible for the economy around here with nobody coming this summer.
Now, when you do go outside, you wear gloves and a mask, or are you confident with Purell in that?
We have been trying to do everything we can. We've made homemade masks. We have some gloves because I work in food service. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep proper protocols with those, though. You go out, you've got gloves, but then you touch your wallet or your phone or something like that, you've cross-contaminated. When we went out for groceries, we had it delivered into the car. We came home, we took it into the garage, we wiped down all of it. When we were done with that, all of our clothes went in a bag, went into the washing machine, we went into the shower, just trying to do anything you can to keep from being contaminated.
In what we've seen so far with this pandemic, what more would you like to see from your neighbors?
I don't know. Everybody here seems to be pretty good. You can go for a walk and talk to your neighbors from their porch, and everybody locally to us seems to be pretty down with it. We live in a fairly older community here, so I think a lot of those people are really keeping their heads down considering what's going on and where the death rates are.
What would you like to see more from the federal government? Testing.
The doctors in China have been screaming what we should be doing for 3 months, and we haven't been following it, except kind of on a daily, one more day. Oh, it's 50 people. Now it's 10 people. Now it's 5 people. Now it's stay home. Don't wear a mask. Wear a mask. Wear gloves. Don't wear gloves. And then, the lack of testing to find out what is going on. We're not listening to the people who've been through this.
No, not at all. Peter, I want to thank you for joining us, and you and your family stay safe.
Okay, you too as well. And everybody in Ottawa, just stay home.
Thanks, Peter. So we've heard from Canadians, our followers and listeners, about how we're dealing with these unprecedented times: self-isolation, physical distancing, hand washing 2.0, all simple and basic ways to avoid COVID-19. And as you heard from our listeners, their biggest concern was the lack of testing in Ontario, along with those who aren't heeding the government's call to stay home. We'll be doing more podcasts with you as the guest to gauge how and what you're dealing with in the midst of this pandemic. If you'd like to take part, just drop us a note on our Facebook page. I want to thank Cindy, Ghazala, and Peter for joining us, as well as you for listening to the Unpublished Cafe. Stay safe. I'm Ed Hand.